Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's Tech Tuesday. My name is Vanessa with ITS Communications, and today we are going to be talking about biobanking with Julie Ottinger, who's a manager for our research informatics team, specifically for clinical and translational services. Before we get started, I just wanted to let everyone know that I am recording today's session. So if you want to go back and review anything that we've talked about today, or even share it with some of your colleagues who may have been unable to attend due to some conflicts, you'll get that after the session is over. Wait about 24 hours for an email from me that's going to have a link to the recording as well as any other links to resources that we talk about today. I also have everyone's microphones on mute. That's just to prevent some unintended background noise. But if you have any questions at any point during the session, please feel free to put it in the chat, or you can raise your hand in Zoom if you'd like to come off the mic and ask your questions. We're going to be having a couple of people from Research Informatics answer questions in the chat as well. So if you see somebody answering, that's somebody from the team who's trying to help you out. So without further ado, I am going to hand it off to Julie. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks so much, Vanessa, for this opportunity. All right, and thank you everybody for joining. So today's topic is biobank informatics. So during today's session, I'm hoping you'll gather a bit more about what biobanking and biobank informatics really is. And then we're going to take a deep dive into what OpenSpecimen is. You'll hear more about that in a little bit, and then we'll dive right into a demonstration of the OpenSpecimen application, and also have some time for some Q&A at the end. All right, so let's jump right in. First, to give you a bit of an overview about where biobanking and biobank informatics falls, it is actually part of the research informatics team within ITS. So research informatics with the CTSC and the JCTO provides what we call Architecture for Research Computing in Health, which is a program that enables WCM investigators to obtain electronic patient data to accelerate their scientific workflows. So the team overall provides a suite of tools and services that are paired with the investigator's needs. And one of those suites and tools is down here in the bottom right, which is Biobank and Ancillary Omics. And we provide specific tools that aid in those use cases. So today we're going to be focusing on OpenSpecimen, which is a biobank information management system. All right, so without further ado, let's jump right in. First, I want to lay some groundwork of what biobanking is. Some of you might not be familiar with biobanking as a term, so I wanted to lay some groundwork before we dive into the discussion. So what is biobanking? Biobanking is a process of collecting, storing, analyzing, and using biological samples and their related health data. So biobanking overall supports both basic clinical and translational research by providing vital resources, those vital resources being biospecimens that can be used in research. So when I think about biobanking, I really think about any sort of tissue or biofluid that comes out of the human body that is then stored for later use. You will hear me refer to a biobank also as a biorepository, as a tissue bank, or just a general repository throughout the discussion. But all of those are interchangeable with biobanking. So let's take that a step further and talk about what is biobanking informatics or biobank informatics. So that is a specialized group and we provide a suite of tools that supports the tracking and annotation of biospecimens. So all of the data that is associated with an actual biospecimen that's collected from a person, that's what we focus on tracking and documenting in a very specific system. We also take that information or that record of the biospecimen itself and integrate it with potential clinical data. All of that combined can then be used to promote research and aid in the analysis of individual specimens. So when we think about, okay, how do we track all of this information? We leverage what we call a biobank information management system, or we also call that a BIMS. And the BIMS at Weill Cornell that we utilize is called OpenSpecimen. So this is an application or a system that we use to track and document all of the biospecimens and biospecimen related data. OpenSpecimen is a service or an application that is brought to the institution as a whole from the Institutional Biorepository Core and the Office of the Research Dean. So those groups actually oversee the OpenSpecimen application itself here at Cornell. And then the research informatics team within ITS, we help manage the application and oversee the maintenance of it. All right, so as I mentioned, the WCM BIMS of choice is OpenSpecimen. So let's chat a bit more about what OpenSpecimen is. So back in 2004, a team actually at WashU was funded by the NCI to create a biobank information management system, again, a BIMS. They created an application called CA Tissue. Back in 2012, the team behind CA Tissue, or those who developed the application itself, redesigned the software and rebranded it to OpenSpecimen. That software then also became open source with commercial support available. So we being Weill Cornell, adopted the use of OpenSpecimen back in 2018. And OpenSpecimen overall is used by over 90 clinical research centers worldwide. So there is a large group of users of the application itself. And then us at Weill Cornell, we adopted use of it as well. So OpenSpecimen tracks a plethora of things. When you think about the specimen life cycle or a biospecimen life cycle, you think about the specimen collection, which is starts up here. And then that specimen might be aliquoted or subsequent specimens might be derived from that original specimen. And then you might either store or distribute that specimen. So all of these steps in the specimen life cycle itself that are entered as events into the OpenSpecimen application. So what we're really allowed to do is leverage OpenSpecimen to track the entire life cycle and chain of custody of a specimen. Within OpenSpecimen, there are then modules or tools available that you can query your existing inventory or even create a dashboard for a quick glance or quick reporting of all of the specimens that your study or lab has collected. Just to give a quick overview of what OpenSpecimen at Weill Cornell looks like today, we have over 30 studies live. We have nearly 2,300,000 specimens recorded and 13,000 specimens distributed. So a lot of records in the application itself. So we've had a lot of use and have learned many tips and tricks of the application. All right. Without any further ado, I'm going to dive right into a demonstration of OpenSpecimen. Today, we're going to cover a lot of different modules within OpenSpecimen itself. We're going to start with some basic navigation, and then also get into some accessioning and reporting tools. Give me one moment. I'm just going to switch over my screen share. All right. All right, you should all be able to see OpenSpecimen now on my screen. So just to give you a lay of the land, and I'm also going to turn off my video as I'm going to start looking at the other screen in a moment here. So to give you a lay of the land of OpenSpecimen, you first start off by navigating to OpenSpecimen and logging in with your seaweed and password. Today, you'll be seeing a demo of OpenSpecimen. So it has a different view than you might see when you yourself log in, when you're provisioned an account. Some basic navigation and tips and tricks. Over here on the left-hand side, you will see a hamburger menu. In this hamburger menu, you will see a plethora of options available, and what we call these are modules. So each of these modules have distinct activities that you perform. The ones that you will likely be accessing or that I access the most often are studies and queries and carts and containers. These are kind of our main areas that we go through. And you'll see those reflected actually on my screen in these home tiles. Now, the nice thing about OpenSpecimen is it's super configurable for each individual user. So if I wanted to see, if I didn't care as much about seeing any distribution protocols, I can go ahead and edit my main home menu and take away that tile if I'm not interested in seeing it. So I say this now because if you log in, you might see different tiles in your main view, and I don't want you to get confused by those. The other basic navigation area that is super, super helpful is this search bar up at the top of the screen. In this search bar, you can type in any identifier and it will find, and the system will immediately navigate you there. So for example, if I am looking to enter data for a specific subject on a trial, and I know their participant ID or their registry ID, I can go ahead and type their identifier in here, and the system will take me right to their record. So super helpful tool for basic navigation. Okay, let's jump into accessioning data. And when I say accessioning data, I mean entering data or creating records for patients and who've had specimens collected for them. So what module we use for accessioning data is the studies module. This is where we will enter in all of the participants and or specimens that we've collected or banked as part of a protocol. So today we're going to focus on first this federated access demo study. And when I click into this specific study, you can see I already have a handful of patients that have specimens collected for them. So if I have a patient who has come back in and I need to collect specimens for them, I can easily just navigate to their individual record, or I can create a new patient. Let's start with creating a new patient. I will note that when each lab or study starts using OpenSpecimen at Weill Cornell, we do configure these data collection pages. So you might not see all of these data collection pages if you end up using OpenSpecimen for your own lab or study. These are configurable per use case. All right, so when I'm creating a new participant or a new subject in a study, I will start by entering a registry ID as well as some other basic information. So today we're going to create a Tech Tuesday patient, and we can assign them a date of birth either via calendar selector or via manual entry if I wanted to do that. Populate any other information, and then click Add Participant. So the great thing about OpenSpecimen is that it supports both longitudinal studies as well as ad hoc data collections. So if you have a study that has preset specimens that are going to be collected for each individual visit, we can pre-populate those collection events as well as the anticipated specimens. That allows for less data entry and fewer clicks by the end user. But we do also support the ad hoc collection of specimens. Say your lab ends up getting a few whole blood samples in that you weren't necessarily expecting. You can still, of course, record those specimens in the application. All right, and just quickly, I see a question from Bruce in the chat. OpenSpecimen. So open data is set up to receive fully identifiable research information. Can it be used to work on just subject ID? It can, Bruce, yes. So there is the ability to remove all identifying information when you are entering data into OpenSpecimen. Essentially what we do is just take out all of the identifiable fields from the data entry page, and you just enter a basic subject ID. Does OpenSpecimen work with REDCap, and can patient information be collected / imported? Can patient information / collection be imported? Yes, so there is the ability to export data from OpenSpecimen to then import into other applications. We will go through that when we touch on the queries module. Okay, so jumping back into the demo here, I am going to collect specimens for a pending week 1 visit. So in this case, we have a longitudinal study with 3 specific collection events with some associated specimens that we are anticipating. So to collect those specimens, again, this is a collection event with anticipated preset specimens that we're going to collect. And you'll see that here on the left-hand side, we list out every specimen type that we're expecting to collect. So for this week 1 visit, we're expecting a whole blood that subsequently is derived into 3 individual plasma specimens. We are expecting to collect fresh tissue that's surgically resected, and then finally a urine collection. Based on my imaginary protocol, there is also weight volume here that we are anticipating. If any of this information would change once you've actually physically collected the specimens, you can absolutely go in and edit the information accordingly. So to complete the data accessioning, we do indicate the event site, so where the specimen was collected. For this scenario, we'll do administration. And you can also denote who was the collector and who actually received the specimens. So again, going back to a BIMS tool allowing you to document the chain of custody of a specimen. This is what those fields allow. All right, so let's say the specimen was collected yesterday and I received the specimen today. I'm also just going to update the procedure date to yesterday. And I will indicate that my colleague, Colin, collected the specimens and I received them. All right, all of this other information looks good, so I will just go ahead and click Create because I collected all the specimens. And you will see then that a new week 1 now appears under occurred events. There are also auto-generated identifiers for the event, the collection event, as well as each of the individual specimens. So now we can see here, if we hover over this green dot, that means the specimen is available for use. As the specimen transitions into different states, what I mean by that is if it gets distributed or stored or fully consumed, this color of the dot will actually change. So let's say if I wanted to directly distribute this specimen, I can select that specimen, click this Actions button, and subsequently distribute that specimen. I have a demo distribution protocol, so if I just wanted to distribute it immediately, I can do so here. And you see that the color indicator for that specimen has changed to distributed. So just some tips and tricks if you are looking at a collection events record and want to quickly just see what the status of each of the specimens are, the color coding helps with that. All right. Now, I also do want to show you what it looks like to create an ad hoc collection. So let's say the patient comes in for a visit in between planned visits, and you end up collecting specimens for them. First, we want to document that the collection event occurred. Let's say the event occurred today. Again, there are other data points that can be collected. These are optional. And when you do start using OpenSpecimen, we can either add additional fields to be collected if you want more data points, or we can take some data points away. All right, so now we created an ad hoc collection event. From here, I can create additional specimen records. So let's say they came in for an ad hoc collection and we actually ended up collecting some fresh tissue. Again, there are multiple other data points that you can collect for that specific data point. And all of these data points are configurable. And click Next. And there we see a new specimen record for that ad hoc specimen that was collected. All right. Just going through the questions in the chat. Is this a resource to help with sample tracking? Yes, it is. We can help with sample tracking. It depends on what samples you're talking about. But we'd be more than happy to chat with you about that, either through later today or later in this chat discussion, or we can all share an email that you can reach out to us and we can schedule a quick consult for you. Okay. So what we have seen so far in this demo is a scenario where we focus on patient specimen collection. We do also have labs and groups that use OpenSpecimen that just want to manage their specimens individually and don't necessarily track the patient-associated data. In those scenarios, what we have is a specimen-centric study where you just create the records of the individual specimens themselves. So rather than creating the patient first and then subsequently collection events, as you see in more longitudinal studies, you can just create individual records of samples. So for this one, we can create a whole blood specimen. And you'll notice that we only collect specimen level information rather than the patient level information. So here you'll see I've created a whole blood specimen record. Let's say I collected 3 mils. You'll see that that record gets created here. And the very nice thing about OpenSpecimen is that we can also capture the lineage of specimens. So let's say we took whole blood and then we spun it down and derived some serum. What we can do is from that whole blood record, we can indicate that we want to create a derivative. And we want to create a serum derivative. In this case, I did not configure this study to automatically generate labels, but we can turn that on. And then we can also indicate all of the other information pertaining to that serum specimen that we generated. So now, if we look back to our original test whole blood specimen, we can see that we subsequently derived serum from that specimen. The derived serum specimen has its own record, so all of the data associated with that individual derivative is documented and noted, but there is also the tracking and linkage to the parent whole blood specimen. This is helpful in reporting and just ensuring that you track the entire chain of custody and life cycle of the individual specimens. All right. So what do you do with bank specimens? Typically, you either store them or distribute them. So what is super helpful with OpenSpecimen and one of the primary uses is the ability to track your freezer inventory and ensure you know what specimens are stored where. So there are 2 ways to store specimens within OpenSpecimen. You can either have the application or the system automatically slot the specimen into an available location or slot in your freezer box, or you can manually select where you're storing that specimen. So for the first demo, I will show you how we can manually slot a specimen into its location. So what you end up doing is you select the individual specimen of interest, and then you click Actions. And again, there are a lot of different actions you can perform here. This is where I distributed the specimens previously. You can also create additional aliquots or derivatives from this page. But to store it, you would select the Transfer button. This brings you to a page where you can select this spyglass and see what slots are available for you to store that specimen. So for this scenario, I've pre-specified that specimens from this study or this grouping can be stored in the demo freezer in either box 1 or box 2. So that's all I see here on the screen. I can select the individual box, and then I get a visual of the box itself with all of the available slots, which are these gray dots, or any slots that have been previously accounted for. So these green dots means that a specimen is already stored in that specific location. So for this specimen, I want to store it in slot 1B. And then I click create. And that will automatically store the specimen in that location. So you'll see that there's now a location associated with that specimen itself. So let's say I want to take a look at all the specimens within a specific box. How do I go ahead and do that? To look at container or freezer inventory, I navigate to the containers module. This is where I see all of my freezers. And when I click into a freezer, I can see the boxes. We can also add other layers. Say you want to have a freezer, a shelf, a rack, and then a box for a hierarchy of your storage. We can configure that as well. But for the purposes of the demo, we just have a freezer and a box. And what's super helpful is to click on the locations option, and you see a visual of all of the specimens that have been stored in each individual box. I can click into one of these records and see some individual information. And if I want to go directly to that specimen record, I can click the hyperlink here. That'll take you to the individual specimen's record where you can again see some additional information on it. By navigating to the containers module, I can also block off individual slots. Let's say I want to save these slots for later use, or there's actually not enough room because one tube was a little too fat and squeezed into the slot next to it. I can go ahead and block off those slots to prevent any specimens from being stored there. If I also wanted to see a list view of the specimens that have been stored in each of the boxes or in the freezer overall, I can click on the left-hand side, this specimens option, and this will give you a list view. Again, you can click into each of the hyperlinked specimen records to see their record page. All right, so that is the basis of the containers module. Now, the most helpful module, in my opinion, is the queries module. The queries module is the reporting tool available in OpenSpecimen. This module is a highlight for me, specifically because any data point that gets entered into OpenSpecimen is available to query on. So it's a super, super powerful tool, and you can create your own queries or reports, again, with using any data point that gets entered into OpenSpecimen. That's incredibly powerful. And you can do this all on your own, and it also pulls real-time data. So if your colleague just entered a specimen record a minute ago and you want to pull a report on that, you can easily do so. So for the purposes of today's demo, I'm going to create a sample query, and then we'll explore some of the different functions within the query module itself. So when you go to create a query, you see on the left-hand side that there are a plethora of data points that you can select to query on. So when I'm building my report, I want to create the report parameters. So for this report, I'm going to say, okay, I want to see all specimens created on or after the 1st of January of this year. So I want to see all specimens that were created this year. All right, so we'll start here. Okay, so I am going to see all specimens created on or after January 1st, 2025. I can get a quick count of how many specimens that is, or I can click View Records. This is going to give me rows and columns of data. Now let's say, okay, I don't necessarily care to see the specimens collected under I know this is the specimen-centric study. So let's further refine my query. Let's say, okay, I only want to see specimens collected under my longitudinal study, which is called Demo Federated Access. And now let's refine the view. Let's see what this pulls for me. Okay, we're getting somewhere. Now I see all the specimens that I'm interested in seeing, but I'm not seeing all the data that I want to see. What I can do is refine the columns that are displayed in this rows and columns view. Let's say I want to see patient first and last name, as well as the available weight volume and the date it was created on. All right. You'll see automatically the view changes. The individual patient information now appears. I can see specimen type, the created on date, as well as the available weight volume. This is great. Now, to go back to the question about potentially importing data into REDCap from Victoria. This is essentially where you can take this data and export it into an Excel format, and then you can import it into subsequent databases. All right. Now let's take this report a few steps further. Let's add dynamic filters to the report view. So let's say I want to be able to easily toggle between specimen type and the availability status. So I want to be able to see what specimens are actually available versus what might have been distributed. I'm going to give those two dynamic filters names, specimen type, and availability status. And I'm going to go back to view my records. Now you'll see on the left-hand side, I have these dynamic filters, such that if I select, I just want to see plasma specimen types in my view, the view will change. It will now only show me plasma. And if I only care about the available specimens, it will refine my view even further. So this is super helpful if you're looking to, check out your inventory just based on certain parameters, but also easily toggle between different categories or different data types, data settings. So I can see, okay, we already distributed one plasma specimen, but what if I want to see all specimen types that have been distributed? I can eliminate that specimen type categorization or filter and just toggle between the two. All right, so this report is looking great. I want to save this now and use it later or share it with my colleagues. To do so, all I would click here is Actions and Save. I'm going to title this query Tech Tuesday and save it. So now if I go back to my queries module, or even if I go back to my home page, I see that same report I can click into and it'll pull live data and have the same columns that I previously indicated. So it's super helpful if you create a report that you love, you want to use time and time again, save it. And then I can also share that with my colleagues. So let's say I wanted to share it with my colleague, Colin. I'm going to drop it into a share folder. And then I can edit that folder and specify that I want to share it with Colin. Now when Colin logs into his account and goes to the queries module and goes to the share folder, he would see that Tech Tuesday query. So we can both access the same query and have a shared view of all of our specimens. All right. Any other questions or any questions? Let me take a look at the chat real quick. Thank you, Karen, for addressing Bing's question. Yes, we can use OpenSpecimen to generate individual barcode labels. OpenSpecimen, we can configure to also send label print jobs to label printers. So yes, all of that can be accommodated.
Hey Julie, I got a message, a direct message asking about whether OpenSpecimen, if there's any cost to use it or if it's just available to labs for free. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Great question. And yes, I have a slide on that after the demo that will highlight the costs. There are costs associated with accessing OpenSpecimen, although they are quite minimal. And we will go through that after the demo.
Perfect, thanks.
Sure. And Jeffrey, yes, a recording of this will be available later. Okay. So there is one last area of the demo that I do want to highlight, and that is the distribution of specimens. So you've banked specimens. That's amazing. Now let's use them and share them with potential other investigators for their use and analysis in their own individual research. So what we want to do is be able to track the distribution of each individual specimen. So let's say, as a researcher, I'm interested in acquiring a handful of plasma specimens to analyze in my research. I can come into OpenSpecimen and say, okay, show me all of the plasma specimens that were collected and that are available for my use. I'll get a list of them here. And I go through this list and I say, okay, this is great. I see plasma specimens for Harry Potter, and there are a handful of specimens available for him. Now, I don't want to use all of these specimens. I don't need 3 specimens from every visit that he had. Rather, I want one individual plasma specimen from each individual visit. And I know that it's each individual visit because of this code here. I see W1, that stands for week 1, week 3, and week 5. Okay, great. I've selected these 3 specimens. These are my specimens of interest. I'm going to add them to my shopping cart, exactly as we do with Amazon on a daily basis. So I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to add it to my Tech Tuesday cart. And let's say, okay, maybe I'm also interested in some serum specimen. Let's see if Harry Potter has any serum specimens. Great, he does. I see one from week 3 and another one from week 5. Let's add those to my cart too. So we use carts when we are interested in, flagging which specimens we want to distribute. So I've added all of my specimens of interest that I want to use in my research or have distributed to me. And then what I can do is after I've added those specimens to my cart is navigate to my cart. This is a separate module. So I clicked the hamburger menu and clicked into the carts module. And I can see within that cart, I have 5 specimens selected. So if there is an approval process, or if you aren't on the protocol that collected the specimens, you might have to go through an approval process to say, hey, can I use these specimens in my research? And then if that is the case, you can share your cart with whoever is in charge of approving or distributing those individual specimens. And I can say, okay, hey, I shared this cart with you. Can you take a look and distribute those specimens to me? And then to record the distribution of those specimens, all you would need to do is go into that cart, select the specimens. And again, here, if you click this actions button, these options look fairly familiar. They are the same options that we have on the specimen records page. So I can click here and click distribute or distribute all. This distribute all just means you're going to distribute all the specimens in that cart. I can select the distribution protocol, add any sort of other comments, and then click distribute. If there are more details that you want to add into the distribution itself, such as who the requester is, if there's any sort of tracking URL, if you want to add in any comments, like specimens are available for pickup at 1300 York or anything like that. You can add them here and then click distribute. And that updates those specimens to being distributed in OpenSpecimen. So again, we're documenting the life cycle of those individual specimens. So if I go back to that specimen record, I click back into it, I now see it has a status of distributed. And it is also no longer going to be available for use or subsequent distribution. All right. All right. And the one last thing I do want to highlight about OpenSpecimen is the ability to link EHR data. So we have a few connections with other systems in place. So for OpenSpecimen, we do have the ability to create a patient and pull in their demographic data from Epic by entering their EMPI or MRN. Essentially what happens is, if we go back, I'm trying to show this to you quickly. Essentially what happens is when you click add participant, when you enter in their MRN, patient demographic data such as first name, last name, middle name, and date of birth automatically get pulled from Epic. So that is one linkage to the EHR data that we have. And then there is also a secondary linkage that we have for surgical pathology reports. So if you are collaborating and collecting solid tissue specimens, there is the ability to pull in pathology reports, leveraging the accession number. So that is another available option if desired. Okay. Just going back to the chat here quickly to see any other questions. Can OpenSpecimen query specimens by specific disease? Yes, that is possible. So if disease is documented within OpenSpecimen, we can do it all within the UI of OpenSpecimen. Or we could also partner with some other groups within research informatics and pull that data for you. All right. Sorry if I'm another question from Bruce. Sorry if I missed it. But who has access to a study in OpenSpecimen? Yes, good question. So in order to gain access to a study in OpenSpecimen, you must be on the collection protocol. So when folks start collecting specimens, they create a collection protocol. So individuals who are associated with that collection protocol are able to be provisioned access. You have to submit a request to obtain access to OpenSpecimen regardless. So that, yes, it does limit who can see the specimens and the associated data pertaining to those specimens to only those who have access. Thank you, Colin, for fielding that one. All right. That concludes my demo. So I'm going to switch back over to the slides quickly here. This is a slide denoting the cost associated with using OpenSpecimen. This is highly subsidized from the Office of the Research Dean. So if you are interested in leveraging OpenSpecimen for your lab or for your study, here is how you can get in contact with us. You can either email ibc-it-support@med.cornell.edu or access either of these two websites. And that'll give you some additional information about OpenSpecimen itself. So I wanted to pause here to address any other questions that the team might have.
Oh, Julie, a couple of people are saying they can't see your slides.
Oh, shoot. Sorry about
Oh,
that.
no,
Let
it's
me go back.
okay.
Let me go back to that quickly. Okay. This is the slide with estimated cost, and these slides will also be shared with you. And then here are the contact information, the contact email, as well as the links to websites with additional information. All right. Any other questions I might not have gotten to? Bruce, to answer your question, the costs are there is a one-time onboarding cost, and then there is also an annual fee for maintenance and support. So those are denoted here. The cost is based on the study size, so how many specimen records you anticipate.
It looks like there's a question about IRB approval from Christina. Is an IRB approval required before access to create the database, to create a database?
Yes, most often than not. Christina, if there's a specific question or scenario that you have, be happy to address it via email if you want to reach out to IBC-IT support, and we can have a discussion on your specific use case.
And then to wrap up, there was a question about whether ITS offers a free trial to use OpenSpecimen, or if there's the opportunity to log in for a certain amount of time to test the application.
We typically do not offer free trials. However, we would be more than happy to meet with you and do a more catered demo for your specific use case.
Perfect. I think we got through all the questions. We are at time, but I just wanted to let everyone know, thank you so much, by the way, for learning more about OpenSpecimen today. If you do have any additional questions that come up after the session, I will be sending a follow-up email with the information that Julie's presented today, as well as a link to this recording. Feel free to just reply back to that email if you've thought of something that you'd like to ask, and I'll make sure that it gets to the research informatics team so that they can answer your questions. But thank you so much to Julie and the folks from the research informatics team that have been on this call and answering questions, and to all of you for taking the time to learn more about biobanking today. Really appreciate it and expect that email from me within the next day. Have a great one, everybody.
Thanks so much. Bye bye.